listening to Hidden Roll, the podcast where we introduce you to the brains behind your favorite toys, games, and all things play. Before we jump into this episode, we'd like to give special thanks to Pop, peopleofplay.com, the one-stop hub for all toy and game inventors. Without them, this podcast would not be possible.
Hello, you are listening to Hidden Roll, the podcast that introduces you to the brains behind your favorite toys and games. I'm artist, engineer, and game inventor David Yakos.
And I'm Branson Faustini.
A D20 incarnate, really embodied in human flesh.
That's how I roll.
Nice.
So there are lots of podcasts out there that discuss toy and game news, gameplay, and reviews, but we want to dive behind the scenes and interview the people who actually make toys and games.
Yeah, we want to ask those questions of where did this idea come from?
How do they make it real?
And were there any obstacles along the way? And today we've got toy veteran Randy Klimpert all the way from Windy City, Chicago. Randy, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So a little background on Randy. Randy is a toy inventor, designer, a industry executive. He worked for the legendary Marvin Glass and Associates, as well as the legendary Eddie Goldfarb and Associates, Cranium Games, Hasbro, and currently you're working as Chief Creative Officer at Creata, a global toy and design marketing agency based out of Chicago.
That's right.
Randy,
It's all true.
You've been around the block, Randy.
You got me there. It's all true.
And I've known you for a while, and there's also a couple of other random things I know about you. You happen to have designed some props and magic acts for Steve Martin, and
I did.
You also have got the world's largest ukulele collection, I believe, in
That's
your home.
true. That's less of a collection. It's more of a cry for help. It's kind of a
Explain yourself.
It's a need. Explain myself. Well, every journey starts with a single step. And I had a ukulele many years ago, and now I have nearly 1,000. So the thing.
I'm assuming you can play then.
Oh no, I can't play a note. Yeah, I can play. Yes, I can totally play a ukulele. It wouldn't make any sense otherwise, would it? And I have a lot of guitars too. We can talk about that later. That's for another podcast. The man behind the ukulele. That's another thing.
Well, the man behind some props and with Steve Martin. What was that?
We'll talk more about magic later when we talk about some toy stuff. But I had some friends in the magic biz. And through a friend, for Ricky Jay, who actually passed away just a couple of years ago, amazing magician Ricky Jay. When I was living in LA, Ricky called me and said, Steve Martin wants to do a magic act, and it's going to be called The Great Flydini. And he needs somebody to help him design and build props. And the premise of The Great Flydini was that everything was pulled out of his fly. So that he would produce, the pants looked normal, he was in a normal suit, and then he was able to, reach down and then pull all these amazing things that you wouldn't believe could be in his pants out of his fly. And so the premise of the act, The Great Flydini. And I built some props for him, especially the Encore, which was a bubble machine. I'm going to give away the magic secrets, but there's a bubble machine on the inside that produced like clouds of actual bubbles as he walked around the stage and took the bow at the end.
You're going to be banned from the Magic Alliance for giving the secrets away.
Exactly. Yeah. I'll never be allowed in the Magic Castle again. Yes.
It's creative.
So I can't tell those secrets, but I'll tell you, there's other magic stories too that I can talk about in relation to toy invention.
Nice.
So.
Why don't we go back to the very beginning?
The beginning.
The beginning. What kind of a kid were you? What were the things you were playing with? What were you doing? Did you know where you were going?
I think I was a nerd, and looking back now, I think I was kind of a nerd and a loner. I like to build things. I did a lot of model kits, but I did a lot of model kits. And of course you do, all the ships and tanks and planes and helicopters and stuff, but I really loved the figure model kits, like the Aurora monster models. So I love building stuff. I was sort of figuring out how things worked by building kits. Like, if you're going to build a car kit, you figure out, oh, I get it. That's what an engine looks like. That's how it works, kind of. And of course, like, we blow them up on 4th of July and then build more model kits. And I also, I think I had a good sense of humor. I was kind of class clown. So I think it was a mix between like class clown and kind of like creative nerd at the same time. I feel like that's the mix. The two subscriptions I got as a kid, I like child subscriptions were Popular Science and Mad Magazine. And I feel like somewhere the intersection between Popular Science and Mad Magazine equals Toy Inventor.
It was a different era then compared to now. I think back to growing up like in the 80s, 70s, 80s, it was a different type of play experience. You could get a stick and go out and you're playing war or adventure, or you're a wizard or whatever it is you had. What are you seeing as like kind of the difference between play then and play now?
Well, for one thing, if I don't say it, you will. Like, toys could be dangerous. Remember, you could burn yourself on Thing Maker or the vacuum former, or you could blow your eardrum out on one of those whammo. Remember the whammo? Oh, yeah. I forget the name of the thing, but like it shot air. I mean, there were dangerous toys, and you'd go to your mother and go, I burned my hand on Thing Maker. Be like, well, don't do that again. So toys were certainly much edgier at the time.
They were edgier, but they introduced a lot of like the creativity and the bravery, the curiosity outside the box play.
Totally. I loved the things that gave you the tools to build things. So like Thing Maker, I remember having one of those styrofoam hot wires, and I remember cutting foam with this it was like 6 D cells in a row, hooked to a hot wire, and then it just came with foam. And I just remember in my bedroom with just plumes of styrene smoke going in my face, no protection, and I'm cutting things out of styrofoam. And those were good times. You can't do that now.
No, you can't. You got to send the kids out just to go play in the dirt a bit here and there.
Yeah, totally.
Did you have any favorite games growing up?
I really loved physical games, what we would call skill and action games, plastic action games is the industry term. So I loved games like Tippet and Rebound and Operation. I loved the physicality. Yes, we played board games, we played Monopoly, Game of Life, Clue, all the classics. But I really dug the big physical games. And I also loved, this is more toy than game, I love stuff with great gimmicks. I assume you guys know Vertibird. Vertibird was my favorite toy.
The big
Vertibird's
payoff.
amazing. The payoff. And here's the thing. I was playing with Vertibird long after I should have moved out of toys, because I was probably 13 playing with Vertibird. I'm like, look at this thing. It hovers on its own. How do they do that? So I just love the stuff that had magic built into it.
So were you the kid that was always fixing the radio? You'd take it apart and never put it back together back the same way?
Yeah, I think I was the kid that took things apart and to fix and then never fixed. I had an uncle that was into stereo stuff and ham radio, and they taught me how to solder. And so I was certainly taking things apart to see what they look like on the inside. And maybe you want to be an electrical engineer, which is what I went to college to do, because I thought you get to solder things and make things. But yeah, I was taking everything apart. Yeah, pretty much.
Cool.
That's fun. So what was your first step into the toy and game industry?
Oh, well, I will say, so I went to University of Illinois to study industrial design. I went to study electrical engineering, and then, I always loved toys, but I went from electrical engineering to industrial design by way of graphic design, which is how a lot of people arrive at industrial design. And then in industrial design, I had this amazing professor, a real role model, Norm McFarland, and he was a professor of ID. And I knew that he had been a partner at the famous Marvin Glass and Associates, the famous toy design company. And I said, "Hey, Norman, what's that like?" And he's like, "You don't want to go there. You want to be an industrial designer." And he went through this litany of why the toy industry was terrible. And I, of course, I thought like, yeah, that's what I want to do. Yes, exactly. Yes.
It's a bad gaming habit.
Yeah. So I had my sights set on that as soon as he tried to talk me out of it. And then pretty much every project I was working on, much to the chagrin of my ID professors, like I was trying to turn into something fun and different and toyetic and funny, and so I had professors like trying to be nice to me, but saying, well, there is a lot of whimsy in your project. We can't help noticing the whimsy, like as if it was a bad thing. So I kind of had my sights set on that. And by senior year, I was starting to talk to people who had some connections, like, can you get me into Marvin Glass? And I had my sights set on it. Like I wanted to be a toy inventor by that time.
You wanted to bring whimsy to the world.
Whimsy. I do remember that. There's a lot of whimsy in his products.
I can see that on your report card as a kid. Doing well in math, but has a lot of whimsy.
Exactly. Too much whimsy. Could he turn down the whimsy? Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. I think that I was like, as a young kid, maybe they called me like a late bloomer. That means like you're not getting good grades in grammar school. But I was probably class clown. And you can't be an idiot to get into a good college. So I had kind of turned around by high school. I always liked to go for the joke. So by the time I got to Marvin Glass right out of school, I'm 21. The famous Marvin Glass and Associates, the sort of prototype for the way toy invention became. So I don't know what you know, but Marvin Glass.
With Marvin Glass.
Marvin Glass, the guy. So there's Marvin Glass, the company, and then there's Marvin Glass, the guy. He passed away young, 59 or 60 in the 70s, in the early 70s. But this guy, he invented inventing. So he's the father of modern toy invention because he's the first guy to say, hey, company, Hasbro, Milton Bradley, there were many more companies then. We can come up with better ideas with my little company of inventors than you can with your group internally. And, you just license them from us for a small royalty. We'll do everything on spec. You don't have to pay us anything. And because I've got this lab of these toy experts, and you'll have better toys that way. And he started by selling novelties, and this was like just post-war. He was partners with the famous Eddie Goldfarb, who I later worked for. And they were doing like yakety yak teeth and like the giant glasses, the giant sunglasses.
Oh, yeah.
They were doing like these novelty products, and they were licensing them, and they were becoming successful. And then by the 60s, like they became the go-to for kind of the toy industry for so many great toys from many people's childhood, like Operation, Toss Across, Mousetrap, the doll Blythe, Simon, that was in the 70s, Mr. Machine was in the early 60s, Light Bright. I mean, they were kind of the go-to. So it was kind of like this glow, like, oh, I want to go there. I really want to be one of those inventor guys. And they were, so unlike sort of their competitors that were smaller the shops, they kind of grew and grew. So Marvin Glass, by the time I got there in the early to mid 80s, like they were like 50 people, and they were designers and sculptors and artists and model makers. And, they were just this big bustling company, and all they did was come up with ideas and then pitch the ideas.
What do you think it is, that secret sauce about going on to the outside versus the inside development? Like why would all this creative whimsy, if you will, be
the whimsy
be in these hubs and outside of the normal grind for companies?
Because having, later, after the invention thing, worked on the inside at Hasbro, there just aren't the resources in big companies to have these skunk work groups. They tend to get underfunded and pushed to the side. So the invention model, which is, men and women just coming up with ideas with a high tolerance for failure, because your success rate is maybe 1 out of 100, and just pitching, is something that it's very difficult. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult for big companies to maintain internally. There are some that do it very well, but there's always the inventor community, which has grown and grown from the Marvin Glass beginnings to be, a global resource for manufacturers. But they're the go-tos because they're always going to come up. They're going to come up with a thing that you didn't know you needed, right? that you weren't working on, because within a company, you tend to be focused. What's next year's line? Okay, what's our follow-up? We've got the success. What do we do after that? And that left field thinking is what tends to come from the inventor community.
Love it. Well, going back to Marvin Glass and you coming out of ID, tell us a little bit about your entry into that skunk works.
Well, so I started out of college. I was living at home and commuting downtown living in the suburbs, Chicago suburbs. And two of the partners sat me down first week and they said, "We've got an idea and we just want you to work on. We want you to figure it out. We don't have to figure it out." And the idea was a crash car game, a game that was about crashing cars together. Essentially, it was like Rock'em Sock'em Robots, but with cars. It seems simple enough, and it seems like a really good idea. So at Marvin Glass, I think some of my dreams of being, a professional designer were dashed because they gave you a bench in the model shop, and you kind of brought your own tools. And I was between two model makers, two kind of old-timey model makers, Nikolai and Roger. And they're like, go to it, kid, and you had to make everything yourself. So no sketches, no presentation, certainly before computers, no decks, no PowerPoints, okay, figure out the toy and make it, and then make it work so that it's demonstrable. So I started trying to work on these crash car games. And I was essentially, building little cars sort of, and then you'd smash them together head to head, and then all the people would fly out. And that's funny, but it didn't have a payoff, right? It didn't what were you going to do? The game's over when the last guy is falling on the road. So I kept bringing them up to the partners and going, "What do you think of this? What do you think of this?" And I got to a point where they go, "You know what?" I said, if you just tell me what you want, and I'll do it, please. I had done a bunch of incarnations, and they said, "If we knew what we wanted, we wouldn't need you," which was one of my first quotes in the toy industry. If we knew what we wanted, we wouldn't have hired you. Okay, good. So that kind of gave me the freedom to, all right, grab the reins, and maybe that wasn't the greatest incarnation. Maybe they had a good idea, but I kind of gave it the old college try. Maybe I'll try to take it in a different direction. So I started taking some of these gimmicks that I was working on, and I tried to turn them into Hot Wheels sets, right? So Hot Wheels, the die-cast car line had been a success since 1967. Mattel was always looking for follow-ups. And that in the world of Hot Wheels, there's always kind of that big Christmas purchase, the big play set, $50, $100, right? It's all mechanical. And so I started working on sort of these crash gimmicks within a Hot Wheels playset. Look at me. I'm in a Hot Wheel. I'm in a little red convertible, and I'm tooling down the yellow Hot Wheels track. And there's a camper van, and I can't hit the brakes fast enough. Oh my God. And then it flips over, and then there's crash, there's a flip over thing and it's crash. So side story here is that I talked about magic before. So my best friend in high school was a guy named Jim Steinmeier, the world's most famous illusion designer, arguably the world's best illusion designer. And he was already living and breathing magic in high school. So, and through college, and we talked magic all the time. And I knew that there was a principle of magic, and not just magic, but motion pictures, the brain can't process certain things fast enough. So if you can do something for the eye, magicians do this, movies do this, faster than about a 24th of a second, you don't see the transition. You just can't process it. You see the before and the after, and you fill in the details. You're like, the brain fills in the gap. So like a panel on a Hot Wheels playset that flipped over so fast from a regular car to a crashed car was like something that the brain couldn't see, and your brain wants to make different connections. So your brain, not to dig too deep into psychology, but your brain wants to take the easiest out, right?
I'm a late bloomer as well here, so definitely always looking for the easiest way out.
No, it's not just your brain, it's every brain, right? So the brain can either think, okay, like, a car hit another car and there was a dent in it, or like it looked crashed. Either this piece of plastic has like gears and rubber bands and springs on the inside, and there's a panel that's seamlessly turned over faster than I can see, or it like really got damaged. And the brain does the math all the time. And it's like, you know what? I'm going to go with real damage. Like that's like, that's what the brain wants to think. So I was doing, these flip over crash sets. And then like another guy at Marvin Glass said, you know what? You should take like that thing, these big playset things, and you should put them in the car. Like, what if you did that in the car? And I'm like, brilliant. I love that. So I started building the same feature in the cars, and that became, and I have a little visual, that became crack ups, in which you crash a little piece on the car.
I loved those. That was a major staple to my childhood right there.
Was it really?
Oh my gosh.
I'm glad. I'm glad that the 21-year-old me made your childhood a happy place. But look, I can demo this. So here's a crack up, and here's a pen, and if I go like that, it looks like I just dented the car, right? But in fact, it rolls over. It flips over fast. So Mattel dug it, and they bought it. And so right after that, like when you have a success like that, you don't want to leave ideas on the table. So then I started thinking, what else could that be? So the two directions to go were like, do I do it in a figure? Oh, that's cool. Not sure what the figure will be. Do I do it in play sets? Because, once you sell to a major company, you can't you can't diss that company by like, you know what? I'm going to take my next thing that does that, and I'm going to go to your competitor. You don't do that. So I was kind of stuck with, if I was going to pursue the success of that, with more Mattel ideas. So I did a play set for it called the Hot Wheels Crash Course, which actually has broken glass. And I think it's the only toy with a broken glass gimmick in it. And then I turned it into He-Man. And it wasn't He-Man. I got a model maker. Like, that was the thing at Marvin Glass. Like, once you sold something, like actually like licensed it to a toy company, then they would give you some model maker help from the real model makers, the real builders. I had this amazing model.
So you went from the Mattel Hot Wheels, because this wasn't a small product. This was a mainstream, one that every kid had. Mm-hmm. And this is pretty fresh out of school for you.
I was like 6 months in. Yeah. And I mean, the thing about Marvin Glass was it was sink or swim. Like, if you didn't sell something pretty quick, you were out. And it was a bit of the pressure was high, was a bit of a revolving door, in that they were always hiring kids out of school. Even though I went on like 5 interviews, and it was a long process to get hired, they were constantly interviewing, trying out, new, mostly industrial design students. And then if they couldn't license something very quickly, they were out in like 6 months. So again, very much sink or swim.
And before we jump into He-Man, I want to go back though to some of this sink or swim with Marvin Glass. I'm very excited about He-Man. Don't get me wrong.
You can see the transition between the car and the He-Man. You see where I'm going with
this. I see where you're going. And but as far as like the types of pressures that you're dealing with there, or like the coworkers, can you tell us a little bit more about what that was like working with Marvin Glass in that?
Well, so Marvin the guy, was So he was gone by the time I got there. He'd been dead like 10 years by the time I got there. But very much the culture was built around him. The culture remained. And he, I mean, again, not only was he the guy that invented inventing, but like that personal charisma that he had, he became kind of the archetype of the idea guy, the idea salesman. I assume these stories are real, but it's said that like he would go into meetings with the briefcase, handcuffed to his wrist, right? And he'd fly somewhere, and he'd only bring one idea. And it was like, this is the next big doll for next year, and I've got it handcuffed to my wrist so that no one can steal it. Like, I think those things are true. And there's a story that, he's on a flight to, I don't know, maybe it's Hasbro, maybe it's somewhere outside of Chicago, and the plane had left the gate, and he's like, you turn that plane around, I have the next big toy in here. And they literally turned the plane around. So
because that's normal.
It was very much, and that's probably apocryphal too, but it's a story that gets told. There was very much this charisma vibe, but also just a tremendous amount of pressure to succeed. There was no warm, fuzzy, like, hey, designer, how can we help you come up with better ideas? We're all going to go out for lunch and we're going to sit around and brainstorm. Like there was just nothing like that. It was like, what do you got for me today? And it was, there were literally brainstorms that, where the partners would like go around the room, no, you. No, you, like, what idea do you have? And the constant kind of revolving door stuff, that just made everybody paranoid all the time. So having said that, there's a lot of romanticizing of what Marvin Glass was like. And people throughout my career have been like, you worked at Marvin Glass? Oh, the place where all those amazing ideas came from. Oh, what was it like? And for me, it was a lot of high pressure, and it made me kind of nutty. It was a great passage that I'm glad that I went through. But looking back, I don't think I was actually that happy at the time. So, but I think Virginia Woolf said, I hate to write. I love having written. I was super glad that I was there. It was kind of like the basic training of the toy industry. But for me, it had its downsides. So it was a very high pressure environment for me. Now, my wife, we were ships passing in the night. She started at Marvin Glass the week after I left, and her experience was completely different. She was like, oh yeah, I loved it there. Like, it was so cool. I'm like, I don't know. I don't have the same stories. So
boot camp.
Every business is success oriented and it's high pressure. But I think that the partnership then really believed that that high pressure was integral to payoff. And there was a partner who would walk around while people were working and would bark, work harder, work faster. That's true.
Make that whimsy quicker.
Yeah, yes, more whimsy. Yeah. Where's the whimsy? I knew people who would lock all their drawers and their desks because it was certainly rumored that people would stay late and go through desks looking for ideas. I mean, it became very desperate. Look,
it was high security.
If you think, damn, like I'm gonna, I might get, if I don't sell something soon, I'm gonna get laid off. You're driven to like find other people's ideas. Maybe there was a time when I was like kind of writing backwards in my idea books when I thought that other people could look over my shoulders. I know that's paranoid, and it sounds crazy today, but I think
Leonardo da Vinci, I think, did the same thing. So maybe.
Do you think he did it so that people couldn't cheat?
I don't know. It's a fine line between crazy and genius, and maybe you were just dancing on that line.
Maybe. I don't think it was creativity. I think I was trying to keep my secrets.
Wasn't there a major security system just to get in the door?
There was. So I mean, again, part of the culture it was the paranoia. They built this when they got enough. When Marvin Glass, again, the guy and the company, when they got enough money based on the successes in the '60s, they built this cool building on the corner of LaSalle and Chicago Avenue, and it was very fortress looking, literally, in that it was kind of poured concrete and had these like little slit windows, which I mean, I had to go like up to the third floor to see if it was raining. I mean, like that's like to look out of like a little slit window. And it was again cultural that like we work on all the secrets. No one can look inside. And I don't remember having a key. I was one of the employees. You'd stand in front of the door, you'd look up at the camera, you buzzed in. Bzz. Then you'd walk into an anteway with a second camera. You'd stand in front of that, zzz, and then you get buzzed in again. It was like NORAD. It was like NORAD for the toy industry.
So a lot of pressure and scrutiny. I think there's probably some sort of a mindset we have for people that come up with toys and games that everything's just all fun and games, all play all the time.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, it's not. It's hard. If I knew what I wanted, I didn't need you. I mean, people, I'm sure this happens to you guys too. Like you're at a party and someone says, I'm an accountant. What do you do? I'm a toy designer. Oh, that must be the most fun thing ever. You just get to play with toys and games all day. And you go, yeah, broken ones that I can't figure out how to fix because I don't know the payoff for the game and I can't get it to work. I mean, it's every profession has its challenges.
And once it's working, you're done. You don't get to play with that anymore.
That's exactly right. Yeah, done. Move on. We'll come up with the next one, right?
So yeah. Come up with some fake vomit.
Oh, fake vomit, right. So do you know the fake vomit story? The Marvin Glass fake vomit story?
Oh, do tell.
So I have to caveat. I wasn't there then, so this is like a famous Marvin Glass story.
This is more of the Marvin Glass lore.
This highlights the Marvin Glass lore. This highlights the sort of individuality and individual lunacy of the designers, but also Marvin's personality. So they had a regular client, I think it was Fish Love, but a major novelty company. And like the toy industry today, companies would come for meetings and they would expect to see ideas. And they'd not given, any hints or any, toy specs. It's just like, show me stuff. And so this designer was like playing with some like silicone rubber down in the shop, and he kind of poured like a goopy blob and put some stuff in it. And it was a discovery, not unlike penicillin. It was a discovery that it looked like vomit, right? That it hardened and it peeled up, and then you could throw it down and it looked like rubber vomit. So he goes up and he shows it, this designer shows it to Marvin Glass. Marvin Glass says, with a lot of expletives that I probably can't use on this, like, that's disgusting. We're not showing that to the client. You're an idiot. So, okay, all right, so that's okay. So the day of the presentation, they show, they have designers come in. And that's another thing that Marvin did. He had designers show product individually, which was different than industry, right? And still to this day, like in industry, the highest guy on the totem pole is usually the presenter. And Marvin he was a great salesman, but he wasn't a great product presenter himself. So he brought in all the designers. So one by one, the designers come in and they show novelty. And it's an okay meeting. And they're like just wrapping up. And this designer, he bursts the door open and he runs in and he goes, "Hurrah!" And he throws the rubber vomit on the table and he goes, "Oh my God." And the client says, "I love it. I'll take it." And without missing a beat, Marvin says, "Well, that's why we save the best for last." So you salesman, you got to roll with the punches.
Yeah, that's
the whoop story.
That's the life of an inventor. You're kind of inventing on the spot sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. Look, it's about the story. I mean, yes, it's a toy or a game, right? But like, what's the story that it tells? Like when you were playing with Crack-Ups as a kid, the story in your head was like, oh my God, look out. Oh, I can't hit the brakes. Oh, crash, right? You're playing out a story in your head. The toy is a story and the story is a toy.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
definitely a culture that's created in that toy and game space, and it makes a whole different breed of person, I believe.
Well, like, yes, I think so, and I think that some of those tropes carry on into inventing to this day. The paranoia, the high security, you don't tell anybody what you're working on, you don't talk about stuff at a party, the competitiveness, people looking over your shoulder, and then the pitch, right? Like, it's all about the pitch. How are you going to sell, and how are you going to talk up the idea? So I think those are things I think that came out of Marvin Glass and survive to this day.
Well, let's talk about that pitch a little bit. You've been an executive, and as well as an inventor, kind of both sides of the table.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the secret to a good pitch? What does it get easier to pitch with time, or?
Yeah, I think it gets easier to pitch with time. I think you become more efficient with time. My advice would be, you got to start with an insight. Always start with an insight. So the insight should be something that resonates. And this was an inventor learning, but also a real Hasbro learning too, because you're in a room full of executives, right? As an inventor, it's usually a more personal interaction. You're sitting across the table from an inventor relations person or a couple people. Maybe there's an executive in the room. But in business and big toy companies, like, you're on in front of a big presentation theater full of people. So you got to grab them. You got to hold their interests. And you have to take them on this journey together where you start with an insight. There's a trend of blah, blah, blah. Or, recent data has shown that children love X. And then you get them, you're kind of like spoon feeding them. There's this, right? And there's this, you agree with that? Yes. And there's this, right? And we're poised to do this. Okay. And then the payoff, then the twist. So we present this. It's almost like, a joke where there's a straight line and a punchline. The straight line creates the reality, and then the punchline is the twist. And I think that's a good way to think about pitching, And the other part of the insight is those are all givens. The insight part is, this is what it is now. And then you do the twist. So when I was living in LA, I took a bunch of evening courses, and I took a screenwriting course just for fun with this guy named Dee Caruso. He was the head writer for Get Smart and The Monkees and just a bunch of shows in the 60s and 70s. And he was all about the pitch. And he's like, you start with something they know and you get their agreement, and then you do your take on the given. It's like, Rocky, right? Big hit, best sports movie ever, maybe, right? You're with me? Okay. What about Rocky? But they're skateboarders, and then
that's rad.
You do the crazy twist.
Or is that BMX?
Yeah, exactly. It's Rocky, but it's BMX. So, I think that became my formula for pitching. It's math. It's A plus B. A is the given. B is what you're bringing.
You think that informs or is kind of a description of your creative process then? Because it's one thing we all have, again, is just our imaginations that separate us from everybody else. And every one of your ideas came out of your imagination. But trying to unpack, where do those ideas actually come from? There must be some sort of structure there around, well, this is the current scenario. This is kind of some of the trends. And then all of a sudden, here's the twist.
I think, it's about magic, right? It's like, how do you bring magic to a child or a family? How do you do something that they didn't know they can do? Or how do you give them an opportunity that they didn't have? So The guy I used to work for used to say, you're bringing the world to a child. If it's a Tonka truck, he's driving the truck. Now, all of a sudden, he's a bulldozer driver, right? You are representing what the world is to a child with a toy. But beyond that, the part that makes an invention sell is like, what's the magic? What's the cool thing? What's that gimmick, that feature, that little piece of mechanics, doesn't have to be mechanical, that takes that thing over the top. And if you're asking me where they come from, I don't know where they come from. I've read, you can read the books on creativity and synectics and stuff like that. For creative people, I don't know whether they really know that. I dream in ideas. I'm sure you guys do too. When you do it enough, like I'll wake up and I'll go, and of course, like the moment of waking up, you're like, I had the most amazing dream with this incredible idea. And then as the day goes on, you're like, no, it wasn't that good. No, it's just okay. But it's also, the other thing about it too is, and I'm sure you guys will agree, you become an adrenaline junkie because you can feel the adrenaline coursing through your body when you've got that idea, when you've got that A plus B, that twist, that, oh my God, it would be so cool if we could do this. And your mind is racing. It's an adrenaline thing.
Oh, it is. And the race is on at that point too. Mm-hmm. Like when that idea hits, it's like, oh, I'm sure somebody else had this exact same idea, and they probably had it last week. I better race. I better get this in front.
Totally. And I've worked with people who literally believe that once you have an idea, it's somehow out there in the ether, and your competitors are working on it too. Like they weren't working on it last week before you came up with it. They're working on it now because you had the idea. Like there's some,
you introduced it to the quantum realm.
Some psychic connection, right? And then again, that adds to the paranoia. But you're right. That first is the adrenaline of, oh my God, this could be the best idea ever. This is incredible. And then the follow-up is, well, if it's that good, somebody already thought of it. Oh, damn, I'm too late. And like that roller coaster.
Well, the creative process is something, in introducing the magic is definitely key. When going back now to, I guess, the magic of that car, the Hot Wheels, Smash 'em Up, you had alluded a little bit to He-Man, and I want to dive back into He-Man, especially here in a couple days. Masters of the Universe Revelation is about to release on Netflix, and I can't wait.
It looks awesome.
I'm excited about it's going to be cast Mark Hamill, the legendary voice actor and Jedi. He's playing Skeletor, which
perfect casting.
Yeah,
that's who you would pick, right?
Yeah,
you're going to do a Skeletor.
He was made to do that laugh.
Yes, he was. Yes,
I'm not going to try that here.
Funny.
So,
well, we call them. We weren't good at naming at the time in Marvin Glass. It wasn't high on the list. So the internal name was the Dent Cars. And so I, pretty soon after that, I got a Merman. Masters had been out for a year, and they had basically done Castle Grayskull and just figures. And the figures didn't really have any features in them. They were just figures. I'm sure you can name as many of those first-year characters, many more than I could from your childhood. But we knew that Mattel was kind of needy because it kind of took off early. And it was a really cool premise, right? Which is basically future knights in space, and very fantasy. Anyway, they were looking for gimmicks. So it's like, okay, maybe I can apply that same faster than the eye can see flip over principle in a Masters figure. So I got a merman and a model maker. It's a powerful combination. And I cut open his chest, and of course they have big chests to cut open. And the first thing I realized was that in the Dent Cars, the crack ups, you basically had 180. It was either pristine or it was crashed. But He-Man's chest was so big that you could get three sections out of it. You could get some damage, some more damage, some, the original and secondary damage, and then, you could get the undamaged. And this was very gross, but we didn't have the armor idea. We thought, okay, these are knights with sword play. We'll get a merman, and like it'll look like gashes, right? So
they were bare-chested figures. Then it was like all muscles,
all muscle, big-chested figure. And with an impact or a poke on his chest, it would flip over, and there was a gash, like a bloody gash, really touched us.
This was the '80s, and this was the '80s. Back then, that was okay, right?
That was fine. It wasn't fine. It actually wasn't fine.
It wasn't.
But then the second time you touched it, it would flip fast again. There'd be a second gash with more blood pouring out. So, and so we showed that to Mattel, and okay. And then when it came out at Toy Fair, pretty quickly after that, they had made the jump to put him in armor, right? And then there are only dents in the armor. Nobody's cutting a merman. You can't do that. That's too gross. So then it became the name Battle Armor He-Man and Battle Armor Skeletor. They used it for two characters. And really interestingly, if you want to go really deep, it's a kind of a repetition of the Rock'em Sock'em Robots story, because as you probably know, Rock'em Sock'em Robots was originally designed by Marvin Glass Associates in the early 60s as two boxers boxing. And then a boxer died in the ring. This is early 60s. Davy Moore died in the ring in 63. And they were like, and Marvin said, okay, we can't do this. Kill the item. We're not showing it. We're not going to, we just can't have this out in the world, even if a toy company would do it. And the designers took it back and they said, let's think about this. They turned it into robots. And then it became the classic because, knocking the block off of a robot is perfectly fine. Same with Battle Armor He-Man, putting dents in a piece of battle armor, just a chest plate, is perfectly fine. No one was harmed in the dueling.
In the dueling of these two robots. But I guess with AI, the at one point they're going to be considered sentient, and then we'll be concerned about our fellow robot. But till that day comes, they will be Rock'em Sock'em bash 'em up robot.
Maybe there'll be sentient robots that have to wear battle armor over their robot body. There's always an out. There's a way. There's always an angle.
So the battle armor, that was the He-Man to have of all of the different He-Man, like, because there was a lot of different variation of He-Man. Like there's I don't know how many He-Man they actually made, but once you had battle armor, and it wasn't just He-Man, that ended up in Skeletor, and you could actually keep score.
In the first catalog, they just had introducing He-Man and Skeletor and battle armor, but then the second year apparently it did well enough where like every other toy they were showing, they're like a new castle and a vehicle, like they used all the battle armors as props in like all the other things. So, I think that it kind of became iconic for a feature action figure. And which is not to say that there weren't feature action figures before. You think of Bionic Man and stuff. I mean, there were certainly features in figures, but I don't know. I mean, it was like simple and fun and very graphic, right? And you liked it, and that's all that matters.
Oh my gosh. Again, another one that sculpted my childhood. I'm quite certain I disassembled one of them, being tactile. I wanted to also see how that worked. And He-Man was more difficult to put back together than some of the other action figures because of the rubber bands and the joints and stuff.
It's all in the spring. Yeah.
That was a tricky one. Yeah, if you've got, I'm sure you've got, if mine wasn't in pieces, I'm sure you've got one there with you right now.
I do. So here's one right here. So, touch the chest, he gets a gash. Touch the chest, he gets that gash plus a second gash. We'll do it again, Skeletor-wise, for Mark Hamill's benefit. So he's got the cool
Mark,
bat.
I'm sure you're watching. So
the cool Dayglow bat on his chest. Oh, that's not turning. He got the dent. He's got the second dent. So, and here's some real minutia. In the models, we were worried about how you're going to reset it. So we built it with kind of like a bandolier, like coming off of his shoulder, so that you could do like a pull and there was like an instant reset, right? And they just cut to the chase, like, okay, just put your fingers on it and roll it back until it stops. They save money and it's a better item.
Kids are clever. They'll figure it out.
Yeah, kids are clever.
Yeah. That Battle Armor He-Man, I think, inspired a whole lot of toy bashing at the time. Because it was like, well, let's see how high off the deck we can drop this thing, and no damage.
That's standard kid play, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
How high can I go? How much can I get? There's like, so I live now like about a mile from the house I grew up in, and every time we drive by, I'll like say to my wife, like, you know what? All my Super Balls are in those bushes. If I can get access to those bushes, there's Green Army Men and there's Super Balls in those bushes.
Yeah, the other 80s toy for me, maybe into the early 90s, were those Muscles. And if you remember,
oh yeah,
just like a pink one little character, and we would burn those, magnifying glass. We would shoot them as far as we could. It was definitely
those were unintended, I think, by the manufacturer. They just wanted you to collect them and display them, but you were creative. You see, those were your formative years, and you were figuring out how to, do something unintended, right?
Yeah.
Like shooting them great distances and burning and melting them. Was that formative for like young inventor in you? I'd say so.
Yeah, I think all of this play definitely, I think, sculpts that creativity, that curiosity, and I think that there's a lot of people that just sort of give up the play because they consider it childish. And right. I think it's the inventor not just inventor, like cross industry. Let's take this outside of toy and game or inventing, but it's the person that comes up with the idea in a marketing agency. The person that comes up with the next greatest dish, they're the ones that are playful and willing to kind of push the boundaries. They never gave up that childlike imagination. So I think it definitely informs.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing. I will say, here's a story from my childhood. I had this girder and panel building system. You built buildings. I think it was called Super City. And I never built a single building with it. My parents bought it for me. It must have been expensive, but I would build like rocket ships and play sets and vehicles and things that like crazy things that fell apart. And my mother would say, God love her, my mother would say, that damn Super City, you never built a single building with the damn Super City. I'm doing stuff. It's like, build something like it's on the box. You didn't do a single thing on the box. But
you're supposed to build it and super glue it together. That's right.
Yes. I think that I was always experimenting and challenging and trying to make things do things that they weren't intended to do. I don't know about the blowing up and the melting. I'm sure I did some of that. Certainly model kits we blew up with little firecrackers. But yeah, I was looking for things that the things didn't do, right? So
something about
that's creativity, isn't it?
Yeah. The joy of making something, do something else, or just do something new.
Right. The unexpected. I mean, my dad too, right? This is true story. Like, my dad would be like, all right, the lawn needs mowing, mow the lawn. So I'm mowing, I'd mow the lawn, in checkerboards and in like concentric circles and stuff. And it would always look like crap, but it would get mowed. But I would do it differently every time. I couldn't just do the lines and the diagonals like a golf course is supposed to be. And we didn't have a big lawn. And my dad would say, why do you have to make a damn game out of everything? Why can't you just do it like it's supposed to be done? That's true. And I grew up to make a game about everything.
Yeah.
So
You
thanks, Dad.
grew up getting swore at by your parents. It's right into your creativity.
Good. They were good people. They were good Midwestern people. It was the 60s and the 70s, and they wanted me to fit in. If you're going to get Super City, build the city. If you're going to mow the lawn, make nice lines. Can you just do that? There was a lot of pleading. Can you just do that?
Just
Please,
color between the lines
us?
for crying out loud.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I wasn't coloring between the lines.
Yeah, your job didn't exist when you were a kid.
Yeah, pretty much. And a lot of people take a very circuitous route to industrial design, period, right? Like you don't find out that maybe it's different now, but you didn't find out that there was a thing called industrial design until you were kind of there, And again, my parents' story, it took me years after I graduated and was building and selling toys for my parents to understand what industrial design had been. Like, and you studied what now? Like, what was that? So.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to, hopefully with the re-release of He-Man, we see some more battle armor coming. And before we,
I hope it would be cool if it makes an appearance in the film somehow, in the thing. I was in you go to Nuremberg, right?
Yeah.
The Nuremberg Toy Fair. There's a toy museum in Nuremberg. It's a cool little museum in downtown Nuremberg, because Nuremberg, Germany, is the toy city of Europe, because there were a lot of toy manufacturers there. And they have a little display case, and I'm like going down, oh, cool, like going through it, and like there's a little display case with like Battle Armor He-Man in the middle. I'm like, oh, that's so cool, it's everywhere. So it's nice, it's really nice that it got ubiquitous. It was my first or second thing in my very early 20s, and it became a thing. So
I love it. Have an idea. It became a thing. That's a new motto. It became a thing.
But through a circuitous route. And I mean, if I had to tell anybody, rarely is your first idea the one you're going to go with, and rarely does that idea not undergo so many changes that you don't recognize it by the end, right? Nobody told me do a figure with a gimmick in its chest. Nobody even said, work on action figures. It was a very long route, and then things keep changing and getting better, and you have a different idea, and you make it a different thing from a game to a vehicle playset to a car to a figure. That's really how creativity works.
And it became a thing.
Became a thing.
Well, before we roll out here, there's a little thing we like to play here with a hidden roll die, just a couple of rapid fire questions, just to throw at you. Just
all right.
Again,
fire it up.
There's no wrong answer.
Oh, sure. You say that now. Sure. You got a buzzer on the table.
That's Branson.
Okay. That's me. I'm the buzzer.
You're the buzzer? Okay.
Well, let's see what kind of questions we can throw at you before.
Okay.
All right, we got the crossbones. Game fight. What games cause you to get into the most game fights?
I'm actually, like, little secret, I'm not that competitive in games, actually. But the standard answer would be Monopoly. Everybody fights for Monopoly.
Oh, everybody. If you haven't flipped a table playing Monopoly, you've never played a game.
That's true. That's totally true. More people fight playing Monopoly. It's statistic. It's like an actual data. More people fight playing Monopoly than any other game.
I'm sure that's in family development textbooks. So, like, there's certain Monopoly fights that actually sculpt
books
humans.
Written about Monopoly fights. Yes.
All right, roll again. All right, the dollar sign. If money was no object, what toy or game would you build or buy?
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to give away a free idea for anybody who has the money. Okay. You know how, like, at Burning Man and stuff, they'll build like a giant mousetrap. You've seen those. Maybe you guys have done it too. Or there's videos of guys who build a giant Connect 4 or whatever. I would like to see a theme park with all of your favorite childhood toys and games made huge, and then you're little, but they all work. Like, wouldn't you want to,
I want to go there.
Take a ride on a mousetrap roller coaster? And again, somebody with the money, but they should do that.
The next Disney.
Yeah.
All right. One final roll here.
All right.
One more final roll. All right. The Broken Heart.
Broken Heart. No.
What toys or games do you love to hate?
Okay. Yeah, I think you guys are going to hate me, but I'm just going to say it, okay? The games I love to hate are the games where you have to do like 20 things on your turn. And you're playing with people who have already played this game so many times, and you're like, okay, I did this, and I did this. And like, nope, you have 5 more things you have to do before your turn is over. Like, okay, all right, did that, and I did, and so I guess I'm saying like deep strat. I'm not a deep strategy guy. And then you're playing these games with people again who like are real experts with the game, and there's a lot of strategy, and they go, "Oh, did you really want to do that?" Because okay, if we're going to let you do it again, we're going to let you do it again because you realize that if you didn't make that move and you did the other move, then you could keep me from claiming the Sword and Magic helmet, and therefore you wouldn't be able to because I couldn't. All that contingency stuff.
It's inconceivable. Yeah, because 3 hours later, if you do that now, you're going to lose the game.
Yes. You're thinking the thinking like 10 steps ahead. Believe me, I'd rather be like smashing something in a game or aiming for something.
Well, Randy, this has been a blast. Just flashing back to my childhood in the '80s and learning and hearing how much of a big part you were of my childhood. So thank you for being here, and thank you for listening. And until next time, go play with some action figures.
Thank you guys so much for having me. This was a ball. Love it.
This has been Hidden Roll, the brains behind your favorite toys, games, and all things play. If you like what we're doing, the best way that you can support us is to like, thumbs up, comment, or leave a review and share us with your favorite brains. Follow Hidden Roll Podcast anywhere that podcasts can be found. If you want to see our beautiful faces, all of our content is also available to watch on YouTube. If you know of someone who would be a great fit to appear in our podcast, or if you'd like to learn the story behind any toy or game, let us know on our social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, or send us an inquiry at www.hiddenrollpodcast.com/suggestions. That's Hidden Roll, ROLE, podcast.com. Once again, special thanks to Pop, People of Play, the one-stop hub for all toy and game inventors. Visit www.peopleofplay.com to learn more. This podcast is also made possible by the continued support of the brains who never grew up, inventors of play, Streamline Design. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.